Hi, I'm Tammy. I'm the physical therapy department here at Building Bridges. And I've got a group of friends here today. We're going to come to you and talk to you a little bit about what physical therapy is and how it could be an important part of your client's care here at Building Bridges. So first off, let's talk a little bit about what physical therapy is. I work basically on strength, range of motion. I address muscle tone to look at kids' gross motor skills, how they're running, jumping, climbing, that sort of thing. But it's actually a lot more than that. Some of the things that we do sometimes cross over with OT, and so that would be a good place for us to start. What's the difference between PT and OT? Physical therapy is going to look at your gross motor movement. So that's going to be your big muscle groups, your core, your shoulders, your legs. Like I said before, running, jumping, climbing, standing on one foot, jumping forward, hopping, riding a bike. Those are the obvious gross motor things. But there's some things that we can do that's part of physical therapy and part of occupational therapy. And that might be something like if we're working on activities of daily living and working on shoe tying, do the kids have enough hip strength and core strength to be able to reach down to their shoe? And then do they have the core strength and balance to hold that position while they do the fine motor work of tying the shoe? And that would be something that I've worked with the OT department before on for kiddos that are having a really difficult time with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's nice to have somebody to really address that core strengthening and that proximal strength in the body so that we can work on the actual activity of putting the shirt on. So if they're able to sit and be stable, they're able to complete that activity so much easier.
And going along with that, for speech and language development, it's important to know that a kid is not exerting all of their energy just holding themselves up at the table, but they're able to focus on developing that language and those skills that they need that we're trying to focus on instead of really, paying attention to, oh my gosh, this is so hard to sit up at the table. I'm exerting so much energy, so that can help it for language development as well.
And talking about, too, core strength, too, for those kiddos that we have the whole body apraxia, building those muscles, the core strength to help with breath and breathing to produce that speech as well helps with our speech language therapy.
I had a kiddo recently who I referred to Tammy. She was making good progress, just not as quick as we would have liked. We were working on putting on and taking off shoes and socks. So I was working on core strengthening, trying to get the proximal strength needed and the fine motor and the sensory piece. I was trying to work in all these pieces, and kind of Tammy was able to tease out exactly what hip weakness she had and proximal weakness, and I saw growth that was much faster than I could have achieved in my own 45-minute session. And it was nice because she went from PT to OT, so she came all ready to go. We got to move right into our activities, and the carryover was just awesome. So I saw way quicker progress.
Well, and that's one of the big points, Carly, is that when we work together on the same kiddo, we do see quicker progress. So there's a lot of kiddos, and Rima and I were talking about this the other day, where a kiddo's going to come see me and they're going to do their gross motor work, but they're also going to get tired out a little bit. So then to go to speech after that, they might be able to sit still a little bit better. And Carly made a good point that if we work on the gross motor work so that that strengthening is there, then it's just easier to work on the fine motor skills and even feeding afterwards. So working as a team, and that's that communication, collaboration, where we're talking to each other about what's your biggest concern, what's the hardest thing that this kiddo's doing right now, and how can I help and how can you help, and we can work together as the best laid team.
Yeah, Tammy, it was interesting when I think we share a few clients. I of course am in the classroom teaching, and I think sometimes what teachers confuse as possibly a behavior issue in the classroom is not, but possibly an inability or a skill deficit to sit up straight or to sit even crisscross applesauce, which we ask them to do a lot in an early childhood classroom. And you were the one that pointed out to me, hey, you need to make sure what you're asking them to do in terms of sitting, it's possible, they're capable of it. And so that I was able to go back into the class and really look at the kiddos who are having difficulty and say, oh, you know what? He's not able to do that right now, and what are some things we can work on, that core strength, etc. So that was really helpful in terms of looking at a child a little differently.
And that brings up a good point, Julie, when you talk about going back in the classroom and kind of looking at how things are going. The OT department has the benefit of, if they're there on a Monday, Thursday, or Friday, then I'm in the gym screening. And so I've been known to point out something, or they're really good about asking me, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But for the staff that doesn't hang out in the PT and OT gym on Monday, Thursday, and Friday, how would you get that screening? And so one of the ways you could do that is, if you ever have a question, people can email me and ask me questions specifically about a kiddo. With the parents' permission, I can pop into a classroom, a speech room, a therapy session, to kind of just put eyeballs on a kiddo and see if there's something that I can help with. But that way I can kind of talk you through some of those problems and see if it's somebody that we would want a PT referral on.
Got it. Yeah, that's good.
And Tammy's really good too with screening kids right away, because I had a concern for my little boy and she screened him right away for me. And also we went through and did some home exercises that she gave us because he had torticollis, which was, well, Tammy can kind of explain a little bit more than me, but some neck muscle tightening. So he always was more positioned like this. So she gave me some home exercises to do with him to strengthen that neck, so he was able to fully have that range of motion moving from side to side, which would help his vision, which is definitely important for language development in our world. But she's great with screening, and she even went ahead and did an evaluation for me just to make sure that we kind of teased out everything that we needed. And she gave me recommendations of, this is a good toy for him for those younger kids that, for speech, we're not able to see a 3 or 4 or 6 month old. We typically see children more around the age of 2 years, but she's able to see those younger kids. And I worked on those home exercises, and I took away some of those rockin' plays that you're not supposed to put your baby in. So it was really helpful. But he is great now and has that full range of motion, and I'm grateful for her.
We want to get an evaluation like that. What's the process for us if we have a kiddo that we think needs an evaluation?
So if you're
that process,
sure, if you're a professional that's working with a child and you think that they need either a physical therapy screening, or once you've kind of talked to me about it, or you've teased it out yourself that they could use a physical therapy evaluation, the first thing that you should do is just kind of let the parents know. The next thing as a professional would be able to contact the doctor, so call the doctor's office, explain who you are and explain what you've seen and that you would like a PT evaluation, and so they can write a prescription. And then the last step of that was, once you get the PT prescription, then it would go through Ashley so they could be scheduled. So she'd be able to schedule them. So it's best if we go in that order so that we're not telling the family, hey, your kid needs a PT evaluation before the doctor's on board. And also that, hey, your kid needs a PT evaluation and Tammy's in the gym the same day I am, so we'll just let her see right after. So we need to follow that just so that it's ethical, but also so that the doctors are kept in the loop for their concerns. They may be already addressing it in a different way. We just want to make sure that that's, good across the board there. So that brings up a good point. So what would kind of cause you to pull me in for a screening or pull me in to kind of ask about an evaluation? So some red flags would be a lot of our kiddos that we see there on the autism spectrum like to walk on their toes. Toe walking is pretty typical up until about your second, third birthday. It's those preschool kids and those young elementary kids that are still up on their toes. Those are kids that I would love to see because I can help you with programs with that. Torticollis is a great referral. Even if we're seeing a sibling that's preschool or kindergarten age and you see the baby in the baby carrier and they're always looking over to the left, might be a point of conversation if you're comfortable with the parents, because I can definitely address that. Kiddos that have weakness that's kind of unexplained. So the kiddos that we were talking about in the classroom that aren't sitting up straight, they're slouching, they're leaning to the left, they're leaning to the right. You see them using their elbows or their hands or their knees to kind of prop all the time. Some of that might be sensory based, and we'll tease that out in an evaluation, and some of it might just be weakness. Kiddos that are 2 and 3 years old that aren't jumping with 2 feet up off the ground, that would be another one. Some of it, again, if we go back to our kiddos that are maybe on the autism spectrum or cognitively impaired, they just might not be doing that because it's not developmentally there yet. They're not watching somebody else jump, so they're not encouraged to jump. But it may be a weakness and a coordination issue. Just kiddos that we see crashing and falling. Again, it could be the sensory component of it, but it might be because of the sensory component, we're not refining our movement, because you and I, if we crash, we're not going to do that movement again. We're going to change up how we do it. If a kiddo is seeking sensory information, and they crash, that's like reinforcing. It's not going to refine their movement so that they don't crash. So you see kids pinballing down the hallway from wall to wall.
Right.
Those are kids that we can address their sensory input, but we can also work through that to work on balance and strength.
Speaking of reinforcement, how about ABA? We've heard about from other disciplines. How about ABA with PT?
Well, I've learned a ton from Tammy and hearing her speak, and also from just talking in passing. So within the ABA department, I work a lot on developing groups for the kids. One of the groups is a gym group. So after hearing Tammy talk and speak with her, what I noticed about a lot of our kids is they were lacking some of the prerequisite skills. So what I saw is that the direct line therapists who work directly with the clients were doing a ton of prompting for a lot of these gross motor skills, and those prompts weren't being effectively faded. So we had to go back, talk to Tammy a little bit, and see like what are some of those skills that need to be working on strength and range of motion before they're able to do those activities that that we're expecting them to do. So one thing I did was work on grouping the kids more homogeneously by both developmental level and physical level. So how we can allow them to be as independent as they can with the activities because they are able to, their body is able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's huge. I mean, the toe walking
Yeah.
too. Since we, the ABA department, we work specifically with kids on the autism spectrum. So tons of toe walking. I'm going to be honest, like I kind of just thought that was a thing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't necessarily think that that was something hugely socially significant to address. After talking to Tammy, the effects that the toe walking can have on a child's life in the long run are huge. So that's something that if we address it very early, then we get rid of all those problems that it could create in the future.
And that's probably the best example of the PT behavioral grouping there is that if I have a kiddo that's just going home with mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa, and we're working on toe walking, they're going heels down, heels down, heels down. But if it can become part of the behavior plan, we knocked that out quick.
Yeah, that was
I
huge.
mean,
It was
we
amazing.
knocked that out super quickly
Yeah.
because it's not just me 45 minutes once or twice a week. It's every minute that they're getting ABA that was part of the program. So that, and it's still gone. The kiddo in question, still on his toes occasionally, but for the most part, I'm seeing a lot of heel strike every time I see him in the clinic. So that's awesome. The other thing that you mentioned was grouping of kids, and that's the other thing. If a kiddo doesn't qualify per se for physical therapy, we do have gross motor groups that we can work on that, where I work with social skills and gross motor skills alongside each other just to work on that teamwork component. So it pulls in a couple different groups. It pulls in those groups that need a little bit more help with the gross motor skills, but it also pulls in that group of the socially somewhat awkward boys that don't want to sit around and talk about their feelings around a table, that would much rather play soccer in the hallway, and so we can kind of address those groups too.
You know, and I feel like that those groups really impact or can impact the students in that we see in the Bridges program, because years ago when I had recess duty with students, I would take them out and say, go, you know, make sure everyone was safe, but wasn't really watching to see who could interact appropriately and who was able to play games. And now I know through some of my education, but also talking to you, that is a really important time when I take the students out, and you've actually done some observing when the kids have been out and told me, oh, that's great, you're doing that with them, or maybe you could try this. And I think that's really impactful for a couple of reasons, because now I am more cognizant when I take the kids outside, but also I can kind of flag some of those kiddos that might need more time than we have here in Bridges for our 3-hour days.
Right.
So I think that's really valuable that they can come to you too. And because it is socially very important to our kiddos to be able to interact when they're outside at recess and be able to play those games.
For sure.
Yeah.
I just did an evaluation earlier this week, and the parent didn't have any concerns for their child gross motor wise because the child didn't have social interest in the things yet, like jumping or kicking a ball.
Yeah.
And the way I explained it to the father was, they may not have those goals right now, but if they've got that ability in their toolbox, then when that playground situation comes up, when they're socially ready for it, and the other kid says, you want to play soccer, they can go, I can kick a ball. Sure, I'll play soccer.
Absolutely.
If they don't have that I can kick a ball tool in their toolbox, then there's a social opportunity that we've missed. You know, somebody says, do you want to play soccer? I don't play soccer. Right? So the more tools that we can build in the toolboxes of all the kids we see, the better they'll be when they get into those social environments, and then it just builds on itself.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes be the gateway to a friendship or gateway to being a part of a group, is the ability to keep up
Right.
gross motor
Right.
wise.
Especially if they don't have the language.
Right.
If you can play a game with me and
Right.
kick the ball and keep up, we're gonna be
Right.
buds. Yeah.
Right. And the foundation, language, a lot of it is play skills. So
Yeah.
if parents feel or the child feels inadequate or not confident with their physical movements, they might not take them to a playground when they're young. They might feel as confident to do the climbing and whatever to build those relationships like you guys were talking about and learn those social skills and the language that is associated with it. So
Yeah.
For sure. And it was like we were talking about yesterday, Rima, about that turn taking and the give and take when we've got the kids that are a little bit lower in their abilities, and you guys are working on language and you're working on, I'm going to say something, then you're going to say something in a conversation. It's not too different from I'm going to roll a ball to and you're going to roll a ball back to me. And you guys would do something like that in your sessions, but we may also do it in the gym, so that if they're getting it in OT and PT and speech, then we're going to just build and spiral up on that even quicker.
Yeah, you definitely help with transitions too in your groups and working on following directions, which is all collaboration with what everyone is doing, because we need those skills to complete
readiness.
activities.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah,
they're all great.
each skill really has a bunch of little pieces in it, right? We have a cognitive piece, the gross motor, the fine motor, the daily living skills, the behavioral, the language, right? And so if we're missing one of those pieces, the child is not going to progress like they want them to, like we want them to.
Right,
So
for sure.
that's where I've really found that sometimes I'm not making any progress for the child, and I'm like, okay, what are we missing? And sometimes it is that gross motor piece or that strength piece. And so that's when, you coming in and helping really makes a huge difference.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I talked a little bit about the behavior acquisition and how that's helped in terms of behavior reduction. So if we have a child who's exhibiting problem behavior in a social setting, say on the playground, we know that when kids are doing the right thing, they're less likely to engage in problem behavior. So the ability to engage with peers in kind of an environment that is a little bit less structured is hugely important for affecting problem behavior
as well. Yeah, the summer group that I'm going to do this summer is actually going to be a recess skills group. So we're going to talk about kind of interjecting yourself into a game and removing yourself from a game, and alongside all those gross motor skills that are needed for the playground. Yeah.
Awesome.
Which ties right in with the skill stream that we do with kiddos. So that's perfect.
Awesome. Well, this was great, you guys. Anything you want to add, Tam?
No, just if there's ever any questions about like what is PT, and somebody that's in a different department or newer to building bridges wants to come hang out, I'm always glad to have somebody else in the gym, and you can email me or text me, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for being here and participating.
Sure.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Okay, all things PT. Over and out.